Hi everyone, and welcome to Avoiding the So What Response in a Sales Situation webinar. My name is Julian Grant. I'm going to be your moderator for the next 60 minutes. And I'm just going to take you through a couple of informational slides about ISA. But before we get started, I want to make sure that you mute yourself if you can. And this will be an open kind of concept interactive webinar. But we'll try to keep the noise down to a minimum as much as possible. So if you have a mute option, we'd appreciate it if you would do that. So I just want to tell you a little bit about ISA. The webinar today is brought to you by ISA, which stands for the International Society of Automation. ISA is a global nonprofit organization with more than 30,000 members worldwide that's completely dedicated to the automation industry. And the whole mission of ISA is to set the standard in automation. And what that really means is there's a few prongs to that. It means that they're taking it very seriously to help their members enhance their professional status through professional certifications. They provide lots of education and training. They offer several conferences and expos in a number of different industries and technical areas of expertise. And they also develop standards for the automation industry. And they have an annual event, which is their biggest event every year. This is called the ISA Automation Week, and that's coming up this October the 17th to the 20th in Mobile, Alabama. And so I encourage you to check out that web URL if you haven't. So if you haven't been a member of ISA, we encourage you to maybe consider becoming a member. There's a lot of opportunities here for people with different backgrounds and industries to help you develop your professional career. I am part of the management division. I'm the director-elect coming in 2012. Right now, Steve Prettyman from Dow Chemical is the director. But as I mentioned, ISA has a lot of different areas of expertise, and there are a lot of divisions and technical groups and interest groups that you can join. And so the management division for ISA is really focused on providing an environment for members to develop their management skills and knowledge and to have a place to share expertise and their experiences about management, or if they want to become a manager, what we're also trying to do is provide some professional education around core competencies of management. And so this is all kind of in a development process right now, but just wanted to share a little bit about how the management division is organized and the kinds of things we work on. One of the things about the management division is the sales and marketing functions are part of the management division. And so that leads me to talk a little bit about the 6th Annual Marketing and Sales Summit, because this is our premier event for this management division. This year's theme is about, are you ready for Customer 2.0? And the reason why we did this is because we're seeing a lot of changes happening in the digital economy with social networking and different ways customers are acquiring information and buying their technology products. So we're taking a hard look at how companies in the automation industry are doing it, what's working and what's not. So we encourage you to check out this website and learn a little bit more about the summit. It's coming up in just about 3-4 weeks in St. Louis. It's always a good time. Always learn a lot of good stuff to take back to the office. It's a very hands-on, interactive kind of environment, and it's a great opportunity to network with your peers in the automation industry. This webinar today is really designed to give you a taste of the kinds of content that we're going to be providing at the summit. And in fact, this particular webinar was something called a speed dating roundtable that we held last year, where we have a couple of experts at the front of the room, and it's just an open dialogue to exchange ideas and discuss challenges that are happening in a specific area. And so we're fortunate today to have Rick Albrecht and Julie Fraser, who chaired this particular roundtable last year, repeat this information in a webinar format today to give you an idea of how this all works. Julie has been a consultant and an industry analyst for many, many years. She's heavily involved with the MESA organization, and she's worked for AMR Research, and she currently works for Cambashi. And Rick Albrecht's a seasoned engineer in sales and has been involved in the ISA membership for many, many years, and has a lot of deep experience in instrumentation sales. And he's been on the front lines of understanding some of the challenges and changes that are happening in sales in particular. So before we get started, I just want to go over some rules. As I said, this is an open dialogue. If you have a question, we suggest that you could submit that through a chat feature on your panel. We'll also eventually open up the dialogue where you can raise your hand and ask a question and interact directly with the presenters. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Julie Fraser.
Thanks, Julianne. And yes, we do truly want to make this an interactive session. So you see a little bit on the screen there about Rick and myself. Again, we've worked together to present some information about selling in this environment the last couple of years. And I'm looking forward to doing that again for all of you who are on today. But to make it interactive right away, one of the things we thought might be useful for us is to understand who you are. So at this stage, we're going to give you an opportunity to sort of take a little poll question and let us know who you are. So you can see here on the screen, your options are field sales, inside sales, sales management, marketing, or other. So if you could just tell us about yourself, which of these roles most closely matches your role in your organization, we'd really appreciate it. So that's all you need to do is pick the one that really fits you best. And just while you're doing that, Rick is a really pro field salesperson. Now, I have some field sales experience, but most of my experience is really more in marketing and also doing some inside sales. So we have, I think, between the two of us, a good balance and some good insights. I also do work some with not sales technology or not sales capability training, but industry sales training, particularly for companies that are not focused in there, in the production industries. So
looks like we have mostly field sales. If there's if it turns out that there's kind of a hybrid, or you have a specialized sales occupation or application, then we'd like to know about that later on, maybe when we get to chat or in the question box.
okay, so thanks for that. Thanks for letting us know. So moving along.
Thank you. And thanks for the introduction, Julianne. I'm Rick. So I was letting Julie finish up with her introduction on this, and we're pretty much ready to go.
All right. So the way, again, to create an interactive session that Rick and I like to run this thing is to sort of find out first what people like to learn. Now, we're not in that face-to-face environment where it's easy for each of you to sort of talk about that in a truly interactive face-to-face fashion today, but we certainly will be when we're in St. Louis together. So just to help you understand, basically what we set up there in those speed dating sessions is a discussion forum. So Rick and I are going to kick it off, and we're looking for all of you to contribute. Again, if you're out selling, you've got a lot of experience, or maybe you don't have a lot of experience yet, but so what are the things that are hot on your mind? Really, we like to use the slides to launch a conversation with all of the people in the room, or in this case, all of the people who are participating today. So the goal is for everybody really to learn from each other. You know, we're not here to try and manipulate you like little plastic figurines that you might move around. We know that each of you have your own experiences, and we really are interested in hearing about that. So again, Julianne mentioned this, but as we go along, please do remember to submit your questions as they pop into your head. You'll see that little place on your screen where you can submit a question in the GoToWebinar panel. So, and then at the end, we'll take all those questions and answer them the best we can, and you'll also have a chance to ask follow-up questions or completely different questions, or in fact, to talk about some of your own experiences or best practices for other people's questions. So one of the things I guess I'd say is all of you who know about selling know that if you're getting questions, that's usually a good sign, and not as common that you get that really scary and awful "so what" response. So I don't know if any of you who have seen somebody do something like this, this is very obvious. Most people aren't quite so obvious. But you know, sometimes in a sales meeting, you really can tell that a prospect isn't tuned into your message. They're not really thrilled with what you're saying. You haven't engaged them fully. And of course, you never want to see that. Now, all of you in field sales are in a much better position to see that and understand it than the people who are part of the process but aren't actually face-to-face with the prospect. So if you're in inside sales or marketing or other positions, very often you have to gauge whether you're getting this response in some other way. You know, so the marketing team will try and figure out, and in fact the inside sales team will probably look at, does the prospect continue through the buying cycle and become a customer. The marketing team is going to look at the results from their campaign. And in fact, people are going to look at, does the new product launch generate new business? If you conduct a webinar, all of these, you know, you need to be looking at, are these building up the pipeline? Are people engaging with you either live face-to-face with your field sales force, on your website, or any other mechanism that you have to communicate with prospects and salespeople. Another thing is, and some of you in field sales may have experienced this, a feeling that you're not really getting the leads you need from the marketing team or from the inside sales team. And so maybe people are coming to you that you don't feel are qualified. So that's, you know, there are lots of ways that we can gauge what the response is out there in the market. And of course, one of them is, are you getting a response at all when you do marketing and different kinds of activities? So, you know, I think Rick and I have both had this happen on occasion where we feel like we're not getting a good response from the prospect. How is this for you right now?
I'd just like to add something. That, in fact, is how we came to the subject of the roundtable and the presentation that Julie and I have done on a couple of occasions. It is discussing the change in the sales presentation, going from what was called a data dump to more consultative or consultative, however you want to pronounce that. And it's opened up a whole new world for a lot of people who were totally trained in presenting everything that you have and not even knowing whether or not there's going to be any interest when you're done. So.
Absolutely. So, I'm sorry. Rick, can you talk through the results? Because I can't actually see them.
Okay, sure. Yeah, the poll results from the first one, it was 40% of the people on were field sales, 20% were inside. No, I don't. No, I'm sorry, it wasn't. It was.
That's all right.
But
How
anyway,
about the one that's up now?
The one that's up now, I can give you right now without trying to remember it. Yeah. Yes, more often than I'd like is 20%. Yes, on occasion is 40, and a few times is 40, and no one has never gotten this response.
Okay. Well, I guess we're all in the same boat then. So,
yes.
You know, every once in a while, fortunately, most of us don't have this as sort of our daily problem, but how do we, in fact, get it to the point where it's very, very rare? Rick just mentioned the idea of consultative selling and the difference between what I call traditional product sales, or, again, the data dump style, where you go in, and it all sounds very nice when you write it out this way. You introduce yourself, you explain your product. If people aren't looking excited, you pull out some other products and talk about them. You explain your advantages over your competitors, and you know, then you reassure the client that your company is going to be their best partner. I mean, that's a pretty traditional sales process. But one of the main ways to avoid it, as Rick was saying, is really to take a more consultative approach. And what does that mean? Well, you still introduce yourself and your company, but then the very next thing you do is you ask them questions and you listen. And depending on what they say, you know, the main thing is, after you've listened, then you can have a real discussion about their issues. Now, one of the tricky things about consultative selling is there are times that the main problem that they need to solve is not really the one that your product set is good at solving. You may or may not know whose product set is good. You may be able to still help them. Most of the time, though, there's some part of what they're saying to you where you can, in fact, help. So it really, sorry?
I'm sorry, Julie.
No, go ahead.
If you have done your homework, then you're pretty much aware of the prospect that you're sitting with. He's going to be in a very small percentage of people who would really benefit from your product. So the odds are you will get to something that you will be able to present, and you will get to the part where you will be able to do a presentation. It's very seldom that you don't, but it does happen.
Yeah, it is very seldom.
So to speak.
Right. The big difference here is the focus. Where in the traditional product sales, you're focused on yourself and your company and your products. And in the consultative sales situation, you're focused on the prospect or the customer. So it is really a different approach, and it does require that you listen, which for most of us with some sales background is not necessarily our core comfort zone. A lot of us like to talk. I know I do. So listening is really critical. But this is a really simple sort of high-level overview. I sort of told you, okay, if you want to get to the top of the stairs and have a nice conversation with the executive or the person you're trying to sell to, be it an engineer or an executive or whoever, you know, I've basically said, well, you know, there's this staircase you go up, and at the top of the stairs you're going to meet the guy and, you know, shake his hand and be really nice. So I'm going to turn it over to Rick to talk a little bit more in detail about not so much the physical aspects of getting up that stairway, but a little more about the ethics that are involved. And I think this is going to be very thought-provoking for you, because I know it certainly was for me the first time I heard Rick present it. So, Rick, with that, over to you.
Okay, thank you. One of the very important issues that you have to consider is that there are compliance principles. There are it's built upon a compliance theory, and it is all integral to human nature. We will either actively or subliminally be tapping into what we psychologically know are the basic responses to most human character needs or wants. So one of the things that we discuss, I recently took a certified sales professional course and received my certification. One of the very big things that was involved with that was trying to really emphasize how much ethics are involved in selling. And of course there are going to be people who can just put those aside and continue to use the advantages that you get through studying human nature. But basically one of the things that we look to do is try and make it an ethical sales process. So when we try and influence someone, we want to try and keep it as ethically above board as possible. And you can see from this slide that there are certain things that once we get into them, I'll give you a little bit more insight into what the compliance principles are and how they actually work. So, and they do actually work. They've actually contributed to the survival and the evolution of the species. When we get to the next slide, you'll see where we start. I can start with some of these things. Consistency. Consistency has kept us safe from unpredictability. Then there's authority. It's kept us alive, as a species, so to speak. It's kept us alive by listening to those who we've come to respect and put our trust in. Rapport has led us to the attraction between the individuals and the creation of social units. Reciprocity is another way of creating bonds that have made civilization work and thrive. So there's a few more. Efficiency has led to technological development and scientific achievements and things. Social evidence is basically about safety in numbers, and scarcity causes motivation. So if things are, like through the millennia, when food starts getting scarce, you go out and get more and you hoard it, you bring it in, and you rely on it for your survival. So all of these things are kind of inbred into human nature. So as we go back to this previous slide, and we'll start talking about with consistency. You remind the customer how your products and services are congruent with how they see themselves. This is part of the part of the selling process that I'll get into a little bit more. Is one of the first things you want to do is build a rapport with your customer. As Julie said, with the old type of selling, the traditional type of selling, you would go in there, and as salespeople, we do like to talk. And I remember when I first got into this many years ago, there was a joke around that after you get done with your presentation, you just sit back and shut up. And the joke was pretty much the next person that talks loses. So you try and avoid that now. So anyway, getting back to the consistency, you remind the customer about how they see themselves and how your products and services will work right along with that. How you will be consistent with the steps already taken, and then you'll fulfill previously cited intentions and promises that you've done in the rapport thing. So then you get to introducing the business. You develop a competitive advantage statement, and which is usually just a simple, concise description of what your company does and how you prefer to work with the customers, and what the customer can expect when you work together. So then you this is where you get a little bit more interactive, where you get a commitment to participate. You want to make them feel at ease by letting them know up front that you're not going to pressure them into a decision, and they don't need to feel obligated just because you're spending time together. You let them know that you're always going to give them current and accurate information, even if it means you're going to do it by some type of follow-up, be it a phone call or an email or another face-to-face visit. So, and one of the important things is let them know that you're not going to waste their time. In order to help them help you discover your needs, you're going to have to ask them a few questions and get some factual info and have them participate in the process. So to help you understand, you ask if you can ask. You just say, would it be okay if I ask you a few questions to get a better idea of how we could be of service to you. So then here is you ask questions, but the big thing is you listen, and you listen, and you listen. The customer is going to tell you in usually a priority type progression what's important to them, and this is the part of the presentation that makes all the compliance principles come alive. The rapport here again is reinforced because people like to be asked what's important to them, and they like to add their opinion and advice about certain things. You're going to get back to people will respect you for the genuine interest in the interchange, and it'll promote commonality and there again reciprocity. The discussion will give you a chance to demonstrate your social evidence by talking about references, testimonials. These are very powerful things if you have testimonials and references, and even at time you have to feel it out yourself whether or not you want to bring it out that you're already doing something with their competitor, because some people can take that, some people can't. But you can always make it seem as if you're doing something with someone in a very similar business or application to what you're talking about. Just the fact that questions are asked and the answers are given in a reasoning sequence will hopefully have the customer make a reasonable commitment. So try different types of questions. Open-ended, we've all heard about open-ended questions, but that will get the prospect hopefully more involved, more engaged, and you'll get more of his opinions and his facts and his belief. If you have to, if you have to get more information, tell them that you're looking for more information. Could you clarify that for me? Could you please explain, or could you expand on that? Can you tell me more about this or more about that? And you can listen from here to eternity and not sell anything. But if you don't ask the right questions in the right order, you're not going to be able to help them in their situation. So 4 of the 8 points of the consultative sales meeting, and we haven't even sold anything yet. We haven't tried to sell anything yet. So I hope that the points that I'm trying to make are basically it's an interactive type thing, and it's not just something where you're going to try and get the upper hand. Actually, you want to be a little bit more on a level of I'm thinking servant master type thing, but it doesn't quite get to that. But anyway, when you ask the questions, some of the questions you might want to that I've found are it's important to ask them kind of in the right order. So if you come up with a little way of remembering whatever works for you, but I usually try and get to what the current situation is, and then I get to what the desired future situation would be. What are the steps in the buying decision, the decision-making process, who, how, what the roles are, things like that. It's good to know what the competitive situation is. If there's something that your competitor is doing, something that they're already buying which is similar to what you're trying to sell, what some of the impediments of that are. What, like, why is this customer talking to you? Is there going to be is there a problem now that would prompt him to make a decision to look into your products or services? Next, you want to know what the time situation is. What's the budget situation? How soon are they looking to move on this, if they're going to move on it at all? How much will, like how tough will it be to get the funding for what you're looking at? What are the company politics like? Do you need to make subsequent visits to either this prospect or somewhere up the food chain, or is there some way that you do you go right into other topics? So you have to. If you've established a rapport, you can pretty much get the information that you need as far as to whether this person is a decision maker or has the ability to make decisions. So both ability to make decisions and authority to make decisions are both important. So and you ask what their success criteria are. What is going to make them choose you. So hopefully you have enough information so that when they tell you everything that's going to be important to them, then you will be able to restate that to them. You have your notes. You start out with, okay, if I understand you correctly, this is what you're looking for. This is the timeline we're looking for. This is what we need to do in order to get your business. And so you summarize all of that. That's the customer's success criteria. Then, while you're doing that, pay close attention, because as you're mentioning things, you may get them re-scrambled, and then that's going to be the customer's prioritization process. So let him participate again, and it'll show you how well you've been listening, and he's going to be glad that you were listening, but he may tell you what's most important. He may prioritize things other than the way you had them down. So if the prospect has been sufficiently qualified, your advantages should match the needs near the top of their list. His needs should match your features and your benefits, and that is step 7, and you're finally selling. You're selling to that need. This is where you get into what traditionally you opened with before. So then once all that has been taken care of, you get a commitment to proceed. You get a firm commitment. You find out what the next best step is, if it's an appointment or a presentation or a demonstration, or this is the last chance the customer tells you, well, this is where we're going from here. So that's pretty much it. As far as my presentation of this, I would love to be, as Julie said, we would love to do this in a roundtable discussion. It's very enlightening for everyone, and this gets a lot of people involved. It has been it's been called spin selling, or Julie, you knew the other name that it was called.
Solution selling. Yeah, there's a lot of solution selling.
Yeah, solution selling. Yeah.
Yep.
But I mean, a lot of people call it, but there's with different twists on it. The thing that really intrigued me was the amount of background work they did into the psychology and human nature aspect of who you're selling to and how to identify it. We've all heard of the Myers-Briggs surveys, to determine if people are going, if they're thinkers or feelers, or if they're driven, or like all those different things go into it. But you normally don't have enough time to sit down in someone's office and take a look around at his family photos and figure out what if this guy is, whatever the letters turn out to be. So it's just a lot easier to get that out of them after you build rapport and start working the process from there. So.
Yeah, great. I think this is a really interesting way to look at it, and an interesting way to approach the process. So, and what I like is that the compliance principles are laid out, as well as sort of the sales approach itself. So one of the things that I got training on quite a few years ago, actually now, probably longer than I like to admit, was a concept around looking at things, turning the sales process on its head, and looking at the buying cycle. So I've sort of taken the same discussion that Rick just led you through in terms of, this is sort of a traditional sales focus is on this part of the buying cycle. So where companies are really at a fact-finding point, looking at all of their options and the competitors and so forth, that's when it's very appropriate to sort of, again, be, the buyer needs to know what your products are and what the advantages are and so forth. That's really the main purpose of that fact-finding stage of their buying decision. And then, of course, you can always help them justify that with your case studies and whatever other tools you might have. A lot of companies do have, specific ways to help justify a purchase. And then, of course, close the deal from a sales side is making the purchasing decision and going through the purchasing process on the buying side. So as we said at the beginning, this is sort of the traditional sales focus. And what Rick just laid out is really a good set of steps for consultative selling. And so what's interesting is, from a buying cycle perspective, if you don't take that consultative selling approach, you've actually missed out on more than half of that buying cycle. So part of what Rick talked about, sort of understanding really what this company's priorities are, is a foundation piece for the buying cycle. If you don't get those priorities straight at the beginning, that's when you're liable to have that "so what" reaction, because you're not necessarily talking about things that are their top priorities. So that's really a critical thing, is to start right at the bottom with the main understanding of what is it the prospect really needs to achieve and what are their priorities. So in the traditional approach, we actually tend to focus on whether the prospect is going to buy from our company and buy our products. So that's just sort of an incomplete view from the buyer's side. You're making an awful lot of assumptions about what it is they want and need. So if you can help the prospect understand what to do and what to buy, that's when you can really start to become a trusted advisor, is in, again, giving them that open space where you ask questions and listen to them about what is it they're trying to accomplish, and, that sort of thing. This is also where, again, you can start to use some of your case studies in who else has done this sort of thing. And you can also be that trusted advisor and show your knowledge in helping them understand what type of solution you have and how that compares to what their other options are. Again, that's an area where a lot of companies do a fair job of sort of providing materials for the sales force. But you really do need to start by asking questions and not make assumptions about all of this other stuff, because if you're not selling to their top priorities, it's almost impossible to get to the purchase. And that, frankly, is a waste of your time and their time. You've got other people who want what you've got. And in a lot of cases, these people are going to want something you've got too. It may just not be the coolest, latest product that your current sort of marketing campaign is about. So you really need to ask questions throughout and support the company through their buying cycle. And I think, again, being respectful and honest and not taking advantage of people is part of the trick to really making sure that you're not likely to ever step into that situation of getting a "so what" response. You really understand what their needs are, so you're not going to miss the mark. So again, if you just sort of take it from the buying perspective, you start to see why that consultative selling process that Rick just walked you through is so important. It really does start at the beginning of that buying cycle instead of partway through. So sort of quick summary, obviously there are some benefits to this approach. Getting the prospect to discuss their issues giving them an opportunity to really learn from you and your experience about what they care about, and really, again, not wasting their time. So, and of course, it's great for you. You never ever want to get into that so what situation where you're not engaged, the buyer or the prospect is not engaged. And the best thing is you really gain a lot of insight. If you really took all those steps that Rick talked about, you would probably learn a lot about, again, he talked about all those questions that you ask. You know, what's the competitive situation? Why are you talking to me? What are the company politics like? I mean, those are the kinds of things that can help you establish yourself as a trusted advisor, not just to one or two of the members of the engineering team who you may already have a good relationship with, but to other people in that company. And increasingly, we are seeing other people getting involved in automation purchases. So I just think there are so many benefits for both sides. It's a compelling approach. So with that, I will hand it back to Julianne to lead us through the question and answer, or what I really would prefer to think of it as a discussion section of the webinar. I do hope that all of you will participate, and if you haven't already written in questions, you can still do that, or you can sort of raise your hand and Julianne will open up so that you're not on mute anymore. But anyway, with that, back to Julianne to get the discussion going.
Julie, can I take it for 1 second?
Oh, sure.
There were a couple of things that you mentioned that I think were very important, and they may not have been emphasized enough. The one thing, the time waster. This gets you out of the position of this person sitting there yawning, saying, so what? And it's very important that you do realize that in the old traditional sales type, you were wasting a lot of time. You were wasting their time. You were wasting your time. And another thing that Julie mentioned is there are more people becoming involved in the sales process for more technology, just because of the level of expertise that's required now in especially in instrument sales, which is what I've been involved with for over 20 years now. But this person is not going to forget that you wasted a lot of his time, so he's not, or he or she are going to think twice the next time you want to come in there and help them solve a problem. If you're the problem, then that's not going to help them at all. Plus, they're not going to refer you to anyone else, knowing that you're going to sit there and just take up more time than they have, because they know how busy everyone is. So that's very important. And another thing is, I know very often when I'm out with a customer, I am going out to take care of a problem that may, in fact, be a product that we sold them 10 years ago. So if your marketing department is telling you, no, you got to go out there and you got to push this and you got to push that, no, that's not going to help this person who has a 10-year-old meter who just may need to have an output changed or something like that. And that may be their big problem right now, but their process is down because of a $100 part that's costing them $100,000 a day. So it's very important. I can't imagine not working for a company where the marketing and the sales departments align and still have the same goal. I've been at enough of the seminar, I've seen enough at the Marketing and Sales Summit, actually, to really be surprised at the level of maybe distrust. Maybe that's a little bit strong, but I'm really surprised to hear that marketing and sales have this end game that is just so different. I can't imagine working with a company that's like that. So another thing that's going to help you out in the consultative sales is aligning the priorities of both your marketing and your sales divisions of your company. Done.
Okay, Julianne, over to you.
All right, thank you. All right, great. If anyone has a question, I just ask that you either raise your hand and I'll unmute you and you can ask your question, or feel free to type into the chat. one question I've received at this point. This can go, it looks like it can go to either of you. What if the prospect will only give you 15 minutes on their calendar? How do you ask questions, listen, and understand in a really short time slot? Who wants to take that one?
Well, I can take a first pass at it, and then, Rick, you can chime in. Typically, those 15-minute slots are from an executive. So in some cases, you're able to work with someone else in the company lower down that you can ask all the questions and get all the political background and understand that person's perspective, at least, on the priorities and needs. So when you get to the 15-minute discussion, ideally, you'll have someone else's concepts that you can sort of, again, you don't want to assume that, but you can sort of ask the questions that are already directed to some likely areas. I mean, one of the things that Rick said is, you know, if you've actually gotten to the point where you have a meeting, and particularly if you have a meeting that's this short, then a lot of times what that's saying is, you know, this company has a real need, and they have some reason to believe that you're going to be able to help them solve the need. So what you need to do is, if you can, do as much homework before you get there so that you're completely prepared, you know all about the company, the situation as far as you can, and you can really focus those 15 minutes on asking a couple of those key questions that Rick laid out and listening to their responses on those. In some cases, just by asking those first few questions, you really will end up getting more than the 15 minutes. But a lot of times the 15-minute limit is somebody who's had their time wasted in the past and is not willing to put it on their calendar for longer.
I'll take it from here. Maybe it's fortunate that I'm in the type of sales where within 15 minutes, you're going to know whether or not this is the person that's going to be able to help you with it or not. Because if this is, like as Julie said, it might be somebody a little bit higher up the chain, but luckily, you know, like when I start asking questions like, what's the temperature, what's the pressure, do you want relays, do you want alarms, what are the outputs, you know, like, if this person isn't the person that has the answers to that, you're going to find out who is. So it may, in fact, be a 15-minute question with this person. But then once you get to, those are the qualifying questions that I get to ask anyway, so I can find out whether or not this person is going to be interested in me solving their problem or not. So luckily I can get to a little bit more of detail and definition before I make a decision as to, or before the customer or the prospect makes a decision as to whether or not I have 15 minutes or not. So.
Yeah, that's a good point about the qualifying questions. I think everybody needs to make sure they focus on what are the key qualifying questions for a customer in your business.
Yeah.
Any other questions for us?
Okay, great. Anyone? I invite you to raise your hand or send a message through chat. We'll be happy to take a question. I got a question here for Rick. I can see being honest, but I don't want an unfair advantage as a salesperson.
Well, well, all I can tell you
it's a loaded question.
All I can tell you is well, it's not that unfair. I mean, it's not like you're mesmerizing this person, or you know, you're reading into their innermost thoughts or anything. But these are just basic principles. You know, it's like, you know, be nice to somebody, they'll be nice back to you. You understand that they respect authority, so that you know, if it's on your business card that you should project that you have the expertise or the seniority, or you are the you're some type of authority on what you're talking about. They'll know that. You can make them, you know that people like to, you know, like you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours, a karma type thing, you know. It's not unjust, but at the same time, it's just, I guess overall, it's just a plug for honesty and ethics overall. You know, maybe it's just the Boy Scout in me that really attracts. But I've always found that if you're honest with a customer, you don't have to remember what lie you told them. You can always just go back to the truth, and that's so much easier. So it's just a matter of respect for the customer, and you know, you get that back in return.
Great. Any questions? Raise your hand, send a chat. Okay, this question just in. If I've gotten a call from a prospect saying that they need something that I sell, can't I shortcut back to the traditional sales focus?
Well, I think, sure, if somebody comes in and they're hot to buy something, sure, that's an opportunistic sale. And you can. In many cases, they call because they want to buy something, and that's great. That's a huge opportunity. The only question, I guess, is there more information behind the scenes that might allow you to sell even a broader set of your solutions? So a lot of times people know if they, you know, okay, a gauge broke or an instrument isn't, you know, is sort of at the end of its supported life cycle, and we really need to upgrade. That's an obvious thing. But very often, if you spend the time to go through the consultative selling process like Rick presented it, you get an opportunity to actually understand whether that might be part of a bigger program where there might be some other things that you sell that would also add to their ability to achieve their objectives, for one thing. And for another thing, just the idea of spending the time to find out how things are going and what someone's priorities are also gives you a better idea of what you can come back with next time and talk to them about. So even if you don't see an upsell or a cross-sell opportunity by asking more questions, very often it does help establish that long-term relationship. And I think the approach that Rick talked about, where you really ask them permission to ask questions, most people really like to talk about what they do and what they're focused on right now. So it also, again, it builds that ongoing rapport that allows you to go back and have another sales call with them, even if they're not calling you.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Julie.
Yeah.
We'll take one more question, and then we'll move to the conclusion of the program. Anyone have a question? Raise your hand, send a chat. I have a question for Rick. You talk about building rapport. What are your tips on dealing with those who view you as being aligned with an internal team that they are fighting?
So yeah, I actually have had a similar experience. I won't take your thunder, Rick, because I know the question. I think you're probably best suited to answer it.
No,
but I have been in a situation where I've walked in and people have perceived me as being aligned with, for example, like a corporate group where they're actually at the plant level, or vice versa. I've actually gotten in because I know people at the plant level, and then corporate's getting involved and maybe doing some standardization across all their sites or whatever. And it's very common for there to be some friction. And so one of the key things, I think, is, again, to make sure that you truly do listen to these people and you truly do ask them their opinion. And don't necessarily, just because your buddies or your allies in that company have given you their perspective, you don't want to push too hard on that as the truth. It's very, I think, even more important than ever to ask people's opinion and listen. I don't know, Rick, have you run into things like that as well?
Just from, I don't really know how it probably more like a resentment thing. I deal with purchasing people, and then I deal with the plant engineers, and then a project engineer, and then I deal with the guy down on the shop floor who probably knows more about the need than anyone. So if I get anything, it's a little bit of resentment that that just typically happens up and down the ladder, so to speak. I don't think it's ever been any problem. Like my experience doesn't span corporate, and sometimes it does, like if I'm dealing with a purchasing person who knows that he would much rather have my project, but somebody in another state in a big office building is telling him he's got to buy something else that he knows he's going to have trouble with. Other than that, I don't run into it much.
Okay, that concludes our question and answer session. Julie, did you want to conclude?
Sure. Yes. So just to wrap up, think about sort of how we did this. We introduced ourselves. We did ask you who you are. We asked a one little tiny question about sort of how big a problem this is for you. Of course, in your actual sales situation, you'll do a lot more listening and a lot less talking than Rick and I did today. But it is important, once you have listened, to share what you know that could be valuable, and honestly not to expect to have all of the answers. I think that's one of the things that also makes someone very approachable and trustworthy, is when you don't know, to actually admit that. So one of the key things that I know Rick wants to credit is this training course. Do you want to talk anything about that? Here's the information, but is there anything beyond that, Rick, that you want to say?
No, just that I thought it was a very intensive 4.5-day training course, and it was I was more worried about the test after this course than I haven't been that scared since college. So anyway, it was very good, and it helped me out quite a bit, and it definitely changed how I approach a sales call now, and it seems to have quite a bit more success with my follow-up rate, and referral rate. So those are two of the things that I can definitely measure. Like when I do a report and I sit down with the boss and we talk about it, I actually have an action plan and a follow-up date that we pay attention to now. So that's something that didn't always come with the with the way I was selling. So it seems to be working pretty well.
Outstanding. So that's where you can learn the same things that Rick did. Here are a few other things that are out on the market about selling that sort of leverage some of the consultative selling. And I mentioned the buying cycle. That comes from the buck starts here. But the big thing, again, is we hope that this has been useful for you, and we really would love to see all of you face-to-face in St. Louis. Rick and I love to get a round table full of people and just have a good discussion. All of us are.
It was a great time. A lot of stuff got talked about and learned about them at the speed dating session again.
It's very true, and we're planning to have it be at least as valuable again this year and as much fun. So we're very much looking forward to meeting all of you. We hope you can attend. There also are some great keynote speakers and lots of other incredible material. So looking forward, we hope to seeing all of you in a few weeks in St. Louis. And again, if you haven't already registered, the registration is through the website there. You can also go to ISA and register, of course. So again, we really hope to see you all there and appreciate your attention and your questions today.
And thank you from me also. And if you are planning on attending the Marketing and Sales Summit, make sure that you let Julie and I know that you were on the webcast, and we'll talk about that also. So thank you.
All right, great. Thanks. Big thank you to both Rick and Julie for their time today. And we appreciate everyone's time today who joined us. This concludes the webinar. We do hope to see you in St. Louis. I echo both what Julie and Rick said. It's a great event and one we enjoy and look forward to going to every year. So with that, we hope you have a great afternoon. This webinar has been recorded and will be posted on the Marketing Sales Summit website in the next week or so. And we invite you to keep in touch with us on the website and on the blog. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Julianne.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.